The book of Hebrews has been kind of an interesting journey in a lot of different ways. And what we've been talking about is the journey of faith. And we've been talking about what it means, faith means, what it means to us, what it looks like, how does it get lived out. The author has used some of the Old Testament heroes to kind of paint the picture for us of what it means to live a life of faith, to walk out a life of faith. And last week, we kind of continued that theme in terms of talking about a race, what the race is, how to stay in the race, how to finish the race, kind of endurance, and all of those things that allow us to kind of get across the finish line. And now we're going to be dealing with a slight pivot, but it is a pivot that's kind of packed into something that we don't like to think about or talk about. Trials. We don't want to think about difficulty. We don't want to think about trials. We don't want to think that that's something that life has for us. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy because we all know that we're going to face difficulty and trials, but we kind of like to pretend that maybe we shouldn't have to, particularly if we become followers of Jesus. That's one of the things where I think the church has really fallen down on, which is this notion that if you just accept Jesus, then everything's going to be fine. You're not going to get sick, you're going to have plenty of money, your family's going to be great, you're going to have a wonderful job, you're going to drive a great car, you're going to live in a wonderful house, it's all going to be hunky-dory. It's going to be sunshine and rainbows, it's going to be great. And I think that fails in so many different capacities. I mean, as a marketing tool and everything else about life. Trials are tough. Difficulties are tough. And we're going to be talking about those things today. And I entitled the message, The Truth About Trials. So we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 12, verses 4 through 11. So let's look at our text for today, and then we'll kind of dive in and break it apart. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom the Father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we have earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Now, last week, the author-preacher is talking about a race, and he's really going to talk about endurance and the things that you need to go through, and that life is a race, and it is a race. Now there's kind of a subtle shift that's taking place. We're still using the metaphor of an athletic contest, but it's a little bit different. It's a struggle. It's a fight, like a boxing match. And I want you to think about that. I mean, it's interesting when you think about kind of that metaphor. When I was in law school, the very first class you ever take is called legal writing, which is basically teaching you to write, talk, think like a lawyer. Terrible. But my legal writing professor was a guy who had been the heavyweight champion of the United States Marine Corps. Not the branch here, the entire United States Marine Corps, the heavyweight champion. This is a tough guy. Obviously a very tough guy. And it was during a time period when they set up an exhibition match with a fighter by the name of Sonny Liston and the young Cassius Clay, soon to become Muhammad Ali. And he was going to fight each of them for 3 rounds. And he said that Sonny Liston, it was like, he hit so hard it was like a telephone pole coming at you. He said the young Muhammad Ali came up to him and said, I'm going to hit you so many times, you're going to think you're surrounded. And he's sitting there going, cocky young kid. Sure, I'm the heavyweight champion in the Marine Corps. He said, I was in the ring with him for 15 seconds, and he was absolutely right. He hit me so hard, so fast, from so many different angles, it actually felt like I was surrounded. And that's one of the things about when trials and difficulties come at you. It can come at you so hard and so fast from so many different angles. It feels like you're surrounded. It's just, it's just coming at you. And one of the things that this author is basically saying is, look, you've got to get ready for this. Part of being able to endure is being built up, being trained, understanding what it's all about. Because if you don't understand what it's all about, if you're not ready, it's going to whoop you. It's going to whoop you straight up. No question about it. He starts out in verse 4, in your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding your blood. Now, all of these kind of verses that we're going to be talking about are very layered. One of the layers in there is kind of obvious from jump, which is, in your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood. In your struggle against sin, what is that struggle? Who is it against? Now, there are sinners, there are evil people that are coming against them. That's who's persecuting him. That's one thing. But is that the main point of that? Is that the main struggle against sin? Somebody else's sin? No, he's talking about that. But he's also talking about an internal struggle that's going on. A war. The sin that's coming to you. The sin that's going to try to take you down. The enemy's going to try to get your attention off of Jesus and onto something else. And what is that something else? What is it all about? He wants you to focus on the stuff coming at you so fast you think you're surrounded, and not on the stuff that really matters. Life is a race, and it is a battle. It is, in fact, a battle against sin. And it's really super interesting to me, because if you understand the Greek and how it's being used there, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. That's a rebuke. That's, look, boys, save the drama for your mama. Okay, where's the blood? You're talking about how much you're being persecuted, how terrible your life is because everybody in this church is coming against you. Where's the blood? Jesus was on the cross. Where are you? But it's coming. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted the point of shedding your blood. Nero's coming. There's going to be a hard time coming. You think you're being persecuted now. I want you to realize how good you have it right now. This is a time of preparation. God is going to prepare you. He's going to school you. He's going to discipline you. He's going to correct you. He's going to train you, because you're going to need it, or you're going to fall away. And you know what, guys? Some of you are already kind of falling away, and it comes from the first part of verse 5. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. That is something that he's saying you're forgetting about the Bible. He's talking about what he talked about back in 2:1, the warning in chapter 2, verse 1, the warning he gave us. Therefore, we must pay much closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away. As one writer put it, we cannot be profoundly influenced or encouraged by that which we do not know. We can't get encouragement from God's word if we don't know it. You guys have fallen. You guys are drifting. I warned you about drifting way back in chapter 2. I warned you about drifting. You're drifting. And the reason you're drifting is you've forgotten the exhortation to you. He's quoting from the Proverbs there. He's telling them in your struggle, you've got to get Proverbs 3:11 through 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son whom he loves. you're focused on the difficulty you're going through, rather than what you need to be focused on, which is what it really is all about, which is getting ready. The response of the preacher to these people suggests that there's some of these guys are talking about the persecution they have faced. That's why he's making this statement. He's hearing them. Look, you guys are talking about this. You guys are talking like you're really persecuted, but where's the blood? What's going on with you? You need to get strong. You need to understand what's happening. You need endurance, because it's not as bad as you make it out to be. If you think about training for anything, training for an event, training for whatever it is, you have to be pushed physically, right? You have to be pushed. If you're training to run a marathon, you've got to run some distance. You've got to put in the miles. If you're lifting weights, you've got to actually lift them. You know, I had an interesting experience yesterday morning. I've got a guy that comes into the gym that I've been talking to, nice guy, but he and I are on the kind of the same schedule. So, and I don't like to be one of those guys. I was here first. You know, I don't like to be one of those guys, so I try to get in. So when I come in and he's just starting on the elliptical, I know I've got an hour. Yes, he spends an hour on the elliptical. This is a guy that gets after it, okay? So I know I've got kind of an hour to get my one little section done. And what happened yesterday was a day that was kind of increasing weight, and so I was going, not only at increased weight, but I was going fast. And it broke me off. I mean, it busted me up. Not this literally physically busted me up, but it worked me out. And all of a sudden you realize that's when you get the most gain. That's when things work the most, is you don't like it in that moment. It's too heavy, I didn't like it. Yeah. But that's when it's working. That's when, yes, you're going to feel, when I turned quickly up here this morning, I can feel the results of yesterday. Okay? But that's kind of the way it's supposed to be. You kind of need that. You need to be pushed. And that's what he's telling these guys. Look, you think you've got it bad, but you don't. It's going to get bad, and you better be ready for it. And the only way you're going to be able to endure and be ready for it is understand what's going on here. See, one of the problems that we have as Christian people, how many, and I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, how many have heard the phrase, bad things happen to bad people, good things happen to good people? Again, no need to show hands, but I presume pretty much most of us. And a lot of us have bought into that. If bad stuff is happening to me, it must be because I'm bad. Or it's somebody else's fault. So I've got to find somebody to blame, or it's on me. And the author is really telling anybody of that mindset, that ain't the way it is. It's just not that way. Everybody's going to face trial. Everybody's going to face difficulty. But somehow, some way, we've gotten this idea. It was interesting. It was a good friend of mine, is pastor of a good-sized church in Gig Harbor. He just retired. But I would ask him, I said, do you do altar calls? Will you come down and pray? And he'd say, no, we don't. He said, I'd love to, but we don't. I said, why don't you do it? And he said, because nobody wants to come down. Because in coming down, they're acknowledging that they have a problem. They have an issue that they want prayer for. And they don't want people to see them coming down, because then people will start to talk about them. And let's be real honest. Christian people have a wonderful little way to do that. Oh boy, you really need to pray for Eric. There's some stuff going on. I can't get into it. But you really need to be praying. That's the way we gossip about people. We say, I really need to be praying for them. Are we saying it in a way that sounds spiritual and good? Sure. But are we saying it really to kind of gossip about people? Because I'll tell you something. I will tell you something. It's the most interesting thing. I've gotten to the point where if they're doing an altar call for children in Botswana to get fresh fruit, and I'm having something going on in my life, I'm coming down. I don't care. I don't care what the prayer is about. And I don't care necessarily who's praying. Super interesting. We went back to visit Rachel in New York. Went to her church. I was feeling kind of the end of a difficult year. So I was going to go up and I wanted the pastor that just preached the message to pray for me. So I started to make my way up, and somebody dipped in front of me and started talking to the pastor that had been preaching, and I found myself getting a little irritated. Wait a second, listen, I'm from out of town. We need to get this out of the way. And guy came up. Can I pray for you? And I actually started kind of like, no, I went, and all of a sudden I felt God say, this is the guy that I sent to pray for you. Dude, put your pride down. This is the guy that I sent. And that guy said the most wonderful prayer over me and over my life. And he was God's guy in that moment. And we've got to be about that. We can't get in with the way. We can't be thinking about all the stuff that we'd like, that we would prefer, whatever it is. We've got to be ready for what's going to come. And one of the things that I think the author has made very clear throughout this is kind of we've gone through the journey down through Hebrews is one of the things that's going to come, one of those attacks, one of those fiery darts, whatever you want to call them, one of those shots to the face is discouragement. Because nothing can get in the way of endurance quicker than discouragement. If you can discourage me, you can darn near wipe me out. Until God sends somebody along to encourage me. I mean, one of the things when you know that it's an attack is when it is a smooth, straight up discouragement. Somebody comes out, yeah. Forget it. But discouragement will come. Discouragement will really come in ministry and really come in outreach. Because the one thing the devil does not want is you to get focused on talking to people about Jesus or living the life that God has for you in that time. In your struggle against sin, it is a struggle. It is a battle. And one of the things about it that's really super interesting is, do you know what the word sin means in the Greek? And I'm all over my notes today, so sorry. I'm not following any pattern here. It is what it is. Sorry. But sin is about us making mistakes. That's what sin really is. It's a mistake. We've screwed up. And what the enemy wants you to focus on is the screw up. The enemy wants you to focus on the sin. This is how it goes. You screw up. You make a mistake. You sin. And the enemy's right there with his finger to wag it in your face, talking about how bad you are, and you ain't never coming back because here you go again. You messed up yet again. How could God use you? You're nothing but a giant, messed up, screwed up human being. And that is a lie from the pit of hell. But that's what he wants you to focus on. That's what's going on with these people that this preacher is preaching to. They have been ridiculed, scorned, and oppressed. We saw that in chapter 10, verse 33. They had lost their property and possessions, and some of them had been incarcerated. We saw it in 10:34. But the suggestion here is that none of them have yet experienced death or incredible physical injury, at least not yet. Discouragement comes. Their discouragement is coming because they took their eyes off of Jesus. And if we focus on the trials, which is what the enemy wants us to do, that's when we'll get hit right in the face when the attacks come. Look at my left. Look at my left. Look at my, oh, here comes the right. I mean, if you focus on one thing, you're going to get popped. It's just the way it is. And if you get focused on what's coming at you, you get discouraged. And then you focus on what's coming at you even more. How do we do this? How do we get past this? There's really only one way. The author talks about it here, but he talks specifically about it in verse 3. He says, consider him. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Consider him. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't lose your focus. Don't lose your grip. Stay focused on Jesus. Consider him. Think about how he suffered on the cross. Think about the people that came at him, that undermined him, that stabbed him in the back. All of these guys, the Jews, think his own people, coming at him in every possible way. Nailing him to the cross, literally and figuratively. Think about him. Consider him. And remember we talked about last week that consider is more than just in passing, think about it. That's deeply thinking, calculating what is it about him that gives him the power to endure. What is it that can give me the power to endure? Focus on the fact that Jesus, the power of Jesus, and only the power of Jesus is what allows us to stand. If we get our eyes off of Jesus, then the only thing we can focus on is our failure. And that's exactly what the enemy wants you to do. The enemy wants you to say, I've relapsed 16 times. Jesus wants you to focus on, I'm here. Let's try this again. Let's move through this. Keep your eyes on me. I will give you the strength. And what is it about trials? See in verse 5, and if you've forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons, my son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. For in verse 6, for the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. This is out of love. This is not to punish you. This is not some sadistic thing. There are people in the world that like to think that trials and these things are evidence. They are not evidence that God does not love you. That's what many people want to think. If I'm going through difficult stuff in my life, it's somehow evidence that I've hacked off God or God doesn't love me, and that's why I'm going through that, which fits with that good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people mess. It's why I don't want, if I buy that, that's why I don't want anybody to know about my problems. I don't want to go up front. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to be on the prayer chain. I don't want any of this stuff to happen. Better not put my problem on the prayer chain, because that would mean other people would know about it, and then my super spiritual veneer gets ripped off my life. Good! We've all got stuff. We need to be praying for each other, fervently for each other, and realizing that we've all got stuff. And that God takes us through the stuff, not because he doesn't love us, but precisely because he does. That's what it's about. There's a constant reference here to father, son, child. Look, one of the things that we, and I'm guilty of this, one of the things that we do is we do an incredible disservice to our children, I think, when we try to take away all the pain and suffering. We try to smooth out all the rough spots in their life. We try to say all the bumps in the road, we're going to smooth all those out. But then comes a big bump that we haven't been able, or had time or whatever, to smooth out. And they're not ready for it. It takes them totally by surprise. We've crippled them in a sense with the idea of, we'll just take care of it. You never have to go through it. Look, I did it. I did it with Rachel. I didn't want her to go through anything that was going to require her to claw her way through. I didn't discipline in a healthy way. I didn't discipline at all. I'll tell you, there was one time she kept touching something. I slapped her little hand, and then I slapped it again. She looked at me like, oh, heck no. Who do you think you're touching? And it's because you've never experienced any of that kind of thing. Never experienced it at all. Listen, there's no question that some of us have been deeply wounded by horrible parental discipline. No question about it, okay? I get that. I own it. My parents, discipline was weaponized, all right? And it was all around success and achievement. If you succeeded and achieved, you got complimented and rewarded. If you failed or lost, the belt was coming off. Okay? And I'll tell you, what that built in me was not a love of achieving or success, but an absolute fear of failure. I did not experience joy from winning or succeeding. I experienced relief that I hadn't failed, because I wasn't going to have that happen. And it changed the entire way I viewed discipline. It messed me up. I hate it when people... Listen, God will take you through anything. God will change and heal whatever it is. I refuse. I refuse for myself, and I refuse to allow you to stay in a place like that. I came to the point where I realized that, look, not just in everyday stuff. We would go, and me as the leader of the sales team, to the rally selling recreational vehicles, and we'd be the #1 sales organization. Do you know what my initial thought was? Was relief, and how do we get ready for the next time to do it again? Because this is only good for this moment. Tomorrow comes another day when we have to prove all over again that we're worthy. And that comes from a distorted view of correction. See, what God is doing, what he's showing us, what this author is showing us through all of this, is that the enemy wants you to question everything, including your salvation. The reality is, that's not what this is about. That's not what discipline is about. This is the love of a father for a child. This is, in essence, the process of sanctification, becoming more like Jesus each and every day, if we will allow that process to take hold in us. But it's an understanding that it is a process. And you are going to screw up. You are going to stumble. You are going to fall. You are going to sin. The question is, what do you do from there? Are you going to learn from the correction, or do you have to be corrected again? Look, I've experienced in my life the Lord's correction. And you know what? Let's put a stake in the ground right here, right now. I brought it on myself. And generally, when we're doing our hardest whining, right, going through all these horrible things, well, if you hadn't done whatever, fill in the blank, you might not have to go through any of it. And now you want to blame God that you're going through it. Well, I brought so-and-so over there. They're gone. They don't care what God thinks. You have to understand, God is interested in you, wants to shape you, wants to mold you, wants to build you, not because you're just a person. He wants to build you as a follower of him. People will say, why is the enemy attacking me and not attacking the dope dealer over there that's making a ton of money? Because he doesn't worry about the dope dealer. The dope dealer isn't telling people about Jesus. You are. He's not going to attack the guy that's his buddy, that's right in there with him. Understand where this stuff comes from. Understand what the point is. Understand what the purpose is. Now, there are plenty of times when we can get attacked and be going through those trials. It has nothing to do with us being righteous or telling people about Jesus. It's because we messed up, okay? But the question is, where do we go from here? Where do we take it? Do we see God as a loving Father who corrects us for our good? It is for discipline that you have to endure. Verse 7. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good. Our earthly fathers discipline us while we're children. God disciplines us throughout an entire life. Discipline, training, building up, fortifying us for what's to come, giving us the power to endure. You're not going to get anywhere by focusing on failure or by focusing on poor me, why am I going through this? Where you're going to get is looking at Proverbs 3, verses 11, 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. There's a clear link, the sonship connection. And the purpose of the instruction is not to harm us. It's to develop our character and to give us the endurance we need. God is dealing with his people as a loving father would deal with his children. Do I love my child if I let her do everything she wants to do, any way she wants to do it, and never lay a hand on her? I'm not saying you have to beat your kids, okay? That's not what I'm saying. There's other ways to discipline. But if I give her everything she wants, never tell her no. She took a class on that, being certified as a babysitter one time. And she had two things going on, a theater camp and the babysitter training. And she didn't do all the sessions of the babysitter training, but she passed the test. They didn't give her a card. She threw a fit. I find myself moving over, kind of saying, well, I'm going to advocate for it. And all of a sudden, I got real convicted real fast. She didn't meet the criteria. You told her that if she didn't meet the criteria, she probably wasn't going to get the card. And now here you are trying to jump in and fix it. Not the way it works, partner. Not the way it works. There's a reason why you have to do all of these different things. It's training. It's discipline. The problem is we have a tendency to see discipline. We see the word discipline, we think punishment. But remember that from the word discipline is where we get our word disciple. It means follower. It means someone who's being trained, someone who's being built up, someone who's being edified. It's not about physical punishment. It's not about mental punishment. It's not about financial punishment. It's about training. It's about building up. It's about heading in a direction that matters. We see it in James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds. For you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Look forward to it. Verse 7 begins with, it is for discipline. For what son is there whom the Father does not discipline? 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 12 through 13. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. The trials and suffering we may face, if we trust God while we're going through them, are going to produce actual genuine joy. Romans 8:18. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. And an attitude like that, which is the attitude that I think we must have, is an attitude that takes faith and takes trust. And how we build that kind of faith is running the race and fighting the fight. And looking to God the entire time, keeping our focus on him. What the author is trying to do with these guys and with us is to switch our perspective, to flip the script, so to speak. A switch from how we see things on earth to seeing things in a heavenly context. And what really matters, what it's really all about. And I guess the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how do we see it? And why do we see it that way? The author tells us in verse 11, For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness in those who have been trained by it. He's really talking about a timeline, a continuum. That's really what's going on. It's going to be a time. There's going to be a period. The question is, will you submit? Will you let God work in your life? Will you submit to the point where your submission and your obedience and your yielding to the training yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it? The peaceful fruit of righteousness. Is that what you want? And will you allow God's discipline to work in you and give it to you? It matters. It's important. God does not discipline us because he doesn't love us. He disciplines us because he does. And we have to always remember that. Lord, I thank you for today. I thank you for the incredible blessings that you have bestowed upon us. I pray, Lord, that you would touch our hearts. Show us where you want us to go, what you want us to do. How we can submit to you in every area of our life. And how we can see the training and the discipline that you bring into our lives is something that is for our good and not to harm or hurt us. You discipline us because you love us. Help us to see that in all ways. And I pray these things in your name, Lord Jesus. Amen.